And today we're here to demonstrate our campaign around the support for free movement for touring artists. Let's just see how this is going to run. We've got a star-studded, sorry, I've just got to, sorry, I keep getting a phone call. Okay, so today we are going to have, the session is going to be recorded. I'm just going to have to take this, Olivia.
Julie, would you mind taking over, please?
Okay, so the session is Jill back?
Yeah, no, it's all right now. Sorry, I'll just quickly do that. I know it's really ridiculous, but it's the hospital calling about my mother, so it's just nothing. Anyway, it's fine. Here we are. So the yeah, it's a great day. It's about carrying on touring and making sure we get really good support today. Please use the hashtag #CarryOnTouring and tag at DevoConnect to continue the debate on Twitter. We're going to have an active chat function, so please share your views, ask questions, and find out more about what's going on and what the problem are. We want you also to ultimately show your support, not only by talking to your MPs, but also to sign a letter to the Prime Minister to say it's time to carry on touring. We need to go back to the negotiation table on this one. Caroline Dinage said our door is open. Well, let's make sure we go to that door and make those voices loud and clear. Marvellously, Tim, who you'll be hearing from shortly, Tim Brennan, was prompted to author this very, very successful petition to seek Europe-wide visa-free work permits for touring professionals and artists. And quite simply, it says, we'd like the UK government to negotiate a free cultural work permit that gives us visa-free travel throughout the 27 European Union states for music touring professionals, bands, musicians, artists, TV and sports celebrities that tour the EU. Now, it's absolutely phenomenal that we've got nearly 300,000 people supporting Tim. This is about, this matters to all of us, whether you're a gig goer or not. This is something that's so important to the UK economy. Today's about, it's obviously had an impact on the headlines. We've had we've got Fish from Marillion, was on the news this morning, and he's going to be on the call later. But we brought together an amazing collection of support. The debate on Tim's e-petition later at 4:30, I know there'll be people on this call who will also really be here to brief, but this is the beginning. There isn't going to be a solution at the end of today, but we need to get Boris Johnson and the government really listening to that public voice and the need to do something about this very important issue. So here we go, and let's start with, can I now hand over to Julie Elliott, who is the co-chair of the Northern Culture Club and Northern Culture all-party parliamentary group, and has great interest in this area, and to take over the reins. So we'll be feeding and co-hosting Julie as we go through. So I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Jill, and good morning, everyone. And can I welcome everybody on the call? It's a hugely subscribed meeting, this, which I think shows the importance of this in Parliament. And as I was saying offline to people earlier, I tried to get into the debate today, and it's so heavily subscribed. We had no chance. And it's something actually on Select Committee, because I'm on DCMS Select Committee, that has come up in the last week or so, and we're going to be doing more, because the implications of what we're talking about today are enormous. So without me going on any longer, I'm going to introduce some of the speakers first to give us a little bit of the context, and then we've got 3 different panels talking about different areas. So it's quite a packed agenda. So I'm going to introduce Tim Brennan first, who is the person who started the petition. If you can just say a few words, Tim, about why you started the petition, what was behind it, and the impact that this issue is going to have on you personally. Tim.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tim Brennan. I'm a freelance video tech, and I've worked mainly in music touring for about 30 years. Today I want to just quickly give a freelance tech's point of view. Broadly speaking, I deal with large video screens and cameras that you see at concerts and gigs. And over the years, I've toured with bands like Madonna, Lady Gaga, Peter Gabriel, and quite a few more. I'm amazed and encouraged by the response the petition has received. Just over 280,000 signatures. Shows there's a real passion for live music. I started the petition so that people would understand why artists and crew need to be able to carry on touring and be able to move freely throughout the EU as we did before Brexit. When we tour in Europe, we mostly travel by sleeper bus. And after the show loads out, we'll go to sleep on the bus in one country and we'll wake up in another country. And that is repeated to the end of the tour. If there's any boarding delays, that's going to be a massive issue. And that could result in a missed or cancelled show. So the UK music industry is known the world over for its talent and innovation. And as such, the technical backup that supports it is actually world beating. And that's why there are so many technical companies, freelancers and specialist trucking companies based in the UK. UK passport holding techs like me will lose out to our EU counterparts if there's any extra red tape or cost. Why would a tour employ someone like me from the UK with limited travel ability? If there's when they can simply use an EU tech. Our industry contributes nearly 6 billion a year to the British economy, and unless we take immediate action to remedy this avoidable situation, the 200,000 people or so that work in live events, like me, will end up on a scrap heap. Both our government and the EU have said it's not their fault. It's not a time for a blame game. Brexit has happened, and our freedom movement has gone. And now we find ourselves left without any exemptions or agreements in place for touring the EU. The future of music touring is looking really rather bleak. Now, my petition has called for urgent action and clarity from our government. And we need them to listen to us and go back to the EU and negotiate this on our behalf. And when I say on our behalf, I want to include the artists, the musicians, the crew, but also other industries that will benefit from this, such as conferences and exhibitions, news journalists and crews, the film and TV production industry, and all other touring professionals that work in the EU. This petition has really brought this issue into the limelight. And as we must remember this, that artists, musicians and crew, we're all in this together. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tim. And can I just say, I'm so pleased that you actually did start this, because it has just shown how key this is actually to our economy, apart from anything else. And I can't stress how unusual it is to get that level of signatures on a petition, particularly in such a short space of time. So thank you. So we're going to hand over now to Ian Smith, who's going to provide a wider context of the impact felt right across the industry. Ian.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks a lot, Chair, Julie. My name's Ian Smith, as already been said. I'm actually a creative arts professional for over 35 years. Run 2 music agencies out of the UK and Vienna, so I'm split-based. But also, as Tim said, this is not just for musicians. This is for the whole of the creative arts industry. Now, that includes dancers, filmmakers, camerawomen, cameramen, theatre. And what brings that to the front of everyone's page, if you like, is the fact that people like Tim and an industry of over 200,000 professionals in the UK help to support those industries. So we're talking about job losses. We're talking about a loss of soft power in terms of the UK's creative industries. We're also talking about knock-on effects to promoters, to education, even in music education. There's a wide range of what's happening. So why am I here as well? A year ago, I started a free, non-commercial, apolitical website called ukeartswork.info to provide clear, good information before we exited the European Union, because I was finding, as an agent who works with everyone from Phil Rudd to from AC/DC, even had been on stage with Tony Benn and Roy Bailey, to very small artists who are starting off. And we were finding that people, bookers, promoters, were beginning to feel nervous about booking UK-based artists in all areas. Can they still come? What are the costs, etc.? And how can we reduce the impact on us? So bookers were beginning to say, whoa. Now, we have 4 main areas. There are work permits and visas, which is a mixed picture in the EU, 90 days free in Germany and France, and in Germany even for technicians. 6 weeks in any 13 weeks in the Netherlands, you can go and work for free. But other places like Spain, Portugal, 0 ability to work without a work permit. So it's a confused picture. It's extremely difficult for people to still be able to tour easily with the logistics involved. The other aspect of this, of course, are carnets, which is a temporary import-export document for instruments and equipment. It's costly and it's complicated, and it makes life much more difficult. What made the press last week was a solution I'd popped into the evidence committee about touring with work permits. And that thankfully is getting some traction now. So this is not all about saying it's terrible, it won't work. It's about saying it's much more difficult now. And just to echo one thing that Tim said that I find is really important, the importance of this to the UK economy is really big. The creative arts as a whole, it's 11.7% of GDP. Those are DCMS's figures, by the way. 6 billion nearly for music, 111 billion combined for the creative industries. It's really, really important. Music, live performances, theatre, etc., is the engine room of the creative industries. It creates a push for people to actually want to see, to hear, to consume the material. And one last thing, and I'll shut up for now, and if anyone's got questions later, happy to come back. I've seen a lot of things in the press, reaction from the general public. Why should they go and work in the EU when we can't, etc.? It's not about that. It's about music and the creative arts, the fabric of everybody's lives. It's also important financially. It's also important in terms of soft power, and it's important to every man, woman and kid in the UK and the EU. So in terms of the overall impact, it's huge in terms of what we've got to deal with now. There are barriers. They can be overcome if the political will is there. But for now, I'll say no more. I hope that was useful.
No, that was really useful, Ian. And I'm just looking as you're talking to that array of slides and buttons and whatever. I have no clue what you do. It's such a skilled world you work in. But I think the impact on the economy is the thing that has taken people by surprise, just how big this issue is and how many people it affects. So I'm going to bring in next Tracy Braben, who's my colleague in Parliament, who's on our front bench, to talk about the important, how much cross-party support there is for this issue. Tracy.
Thank you so much for the invitation today, and honestly it's hugely exciting to be with you, and congratulations to Tim for this petition. As Julie said, I mean, it is phenomenal the amount of attention it's got, and I was really pleased as well to be able to speak in Parliament about the absolutely frustrating situation we're in, the fact that the Home Office, and it did feel like there were people trying to get this over the line and get this ease of access over the line, and somebody somewhere blocked it, and we will get to the bottom of that eventually. But obviously that's not the issue. It's not a party political thing. We need to make sure that our creatives can move around the region. And one thing that is really important for me is there's been no equality impact assessment on this, and I really believe that working class artists particularly will be really damaged by this, because when you're starting out, you know, and I started out as an actor, you're living on fresh air, and the idea that you're going to have to pay more money for carnets, for visas, actually those young bands, those young musicians or actors or artists or creatives may not then think that a tour in Europe where you can hone your talent, get your skills up and running is for them. So the industry is going to turn into an industry that only those with family money or savings can get involved with. So it's actually a fundamental problem about how do we incubate our talent, how do we find those pipelines for them to get up on stage and to polish their craft. But of course, it's not just about that. It's also about the ecology around the creative artist, the wagons, the designers, the tech, the electricians, those musicians who support the artist. You know, we were talking about in Parliament about cabotage, where that's changed, where now if you're the LSO, you might have to, if you have more than 3 gigs, you might have to find another truck to load your stuff around the EU. Extra costs at a time when we don't need them. I'm standing as the Labour candidate for West Yorkshire Mayor, and across West Yorkshire, our creative industries grew 10.9% before COVID. I absolutely don't want to see that shrink. And certainly, I, like Julie, also put my name in to speak and couldn't get on the list. But I know that this is a cross-party effort. And Tim, you've done an amazing job in getting it out there. And can I also thank Howard and Horace and Sasha for his work on the nighttime economy. So many have been supporting you from this position of fairness. So just congratulations to you. I can't wait to hear the debate and hear what people are saying. And, you know, I am definitely in your corner. We won't give up, because it's an injustice. And if it's all about sovereignty, then we have to right that wrong, don't we? Because with the vaccine doing so well, the rollout happening so swiftly, this is a light at the end of the tunnel for our sector. We must be able to make the most of it across Europe. So Tim, you're a legend, and there'll be a venue named after you. And just thanks to everybody for all you're doing. You know, it's brilliant work, and we are all behind you.
Thanks very much, Tracy. And you know, I totally agree with everything you said there. So we've kind of got the context set of what this is all about now. We've got 3 panels, which we're going to hear one after the other, addressing different parts of the issue. And then at the end of that, there will be an opportunity for everybody to chip in and ask questions and whatever. So the first panel is going to talk about why we need to carry on touring. So we're going to get short responses from different people saying about how this issue affects them personally, and the importance is that we get a coherent voice and information for MPs on the call to be able to participate in the debate this evening, so that MPs who've been lucky enough to get on the call list are really representing the nuts and bolts of what the real problem is. So we'll start off with Louise Richards, who is Executive Director of Motion House. Louise.
Hi there, thanks a lot for having me. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of small to mid-scale touring performance companies. The vibrant cultural ecology of the UK spans all scales, all art forms, and I believe fundamentally depends on our ability to tour. I run a very successful company called Motion House, a touring dance circus company which I co-founded in 1988. We tour dance circus productions across the UK and also across the globe. Unusually for our sector, we employ our team, including all our performers, year round. Such is the scale of our touring work in normal times. On average, 50% of our annual touring income comes from taking our work to the EU. And I think our situation can be replicated across many dance, theatre and circus organisations. In the 2 years before the pandemic, we toured 7 shows to 33 theatres and festivals in the EU, performing 125 times in 13 EU countries, generating around £300,000 in income. Prior to Brexit, taking a booking for our work to Europe was no more complicated than taking a booking in the UK. We were able to travel, transport our sets, work, and perform in any of the member states with no restrictions. Now, as already commented on, we face a series of problems and barriers to that really important market in moving our people, our sets, and our equipment. We'll be limited to the overall amount of time each performer or crew member individually can travel both within the EU as a whole and within each individual country. We have to navigate the different requirements of every member state, which all apply different approaches for non-EU workers generating earned income within their countries, setting their own rules regarding visa waivers, work permits, and maximum working days allowed. In addition to those in-country limitations, we must also monitor how much time every individual company member spends in the Schengen area, and this is going to include their holidays. This is because UK nationals now only have the right to be within the Schengen area for a maximum of 90 days out of 180, whether that's working or holidays in any of the countries, which could put us in the position of having to refuse work. For example, in 2019, we were only the equivalent of one booking off our team reaching that limit. Large amounts of admin and cost are going to be needed for every potential booking as we work out if we can respond to demand across the EU and stay within the permitted working allowances of each country, whether that's being allowed for up to 6 weeks in 13 in the Netherlands, but that's only for one visit, so a 2-day booking still means no return in 13 weeks, 14 days in Norway, or no waiver at all and work permit required in many of the other countries. Currently, there is little clarity on many of the EU's country-specific requirements, and we're finding conflicting information and advice, and even finding that country embassies themselves are unable to give us clear information. Touring to the UK is going to become a major administrative and logistical burden, adding significant costs to operations, and with the danger that those additional costs are going to price UK artists across all art forms out of the market. This removes our ability to be agile and responsive to our venue, festival and promoter partners in the EU. It will mean that last-minute bookings will be impossible to respond to due to lead-in time for entry documentation. It's going to create extra pressure for us as a touring company, as we won't be able to quickly replace performers in the case of injury or illness. In addition, as mentioned, we'll need to produce carnets to move our equipment out and back into the UK, and the costs of carnets reduce our bottom line and push up our prices. For all our productions, we transport sets and equipment, those carnet goods, and cabotage, as mentioned, will rule out longer tours, making it impossible for a vehicle registered in the UK to move to more than 3 points in 7 days within an EU country. So, for example, for us, a typical 2-week tour to 3 cities will not work. All of this comes at a cost in staff time, transport and accommodation costs, in people time to account for delays, for the expense of carnets, permits and visas. Using bookings that we're currently in discussion for, which account for 56 performances at 20 venues in 11 countries over the next year, on current assumptions, we're potentially looking at 40,000 plus in costs for visas, work permits.
Louise, I'm going to have to move you along because we'll never get anybody in. I know what is coming across is how passionate and how complex this issue is. Thank you very much, Louise. I'm going to move next to a composer now, Howard Goodall. Howard.
Hi, yes, I'm a composer and lyricist and a conductor and a broadcaster and a writer. I want to speak up here for a slightly different model. We've all been talking about touring groups, bands, folk, jazz, etc., rock bands, and a lot of very famous names have been behind this campaign doing that. But of course, the vast majority of professional musicians are not famous and they're not paid huge amounts of money to do what they do. There is another model, which is the professional classical instrumentalists and singers who go across to Europe to do their work and have done over the last 30 years to make a percentage, in some cases a very large percentage, of what they live on and how they support their families. And what's going to happen with these carnet costs, the additional insurance costs and the visa costs, is that the amount of money the average musician gets to play a gig in Berlin for one night or France for one night won't be enough to cover those costs. It will become an unviable profession. And this is absolutely devastating for thousands of people and their families. It's not just a question of pop stars, it is a question for ordinary musicians who are going to be absolutely clobbered by this when they discover how expensive it is. And we're talking at the moment about short-term gigs and short-term contracts. If you have a longer contract, for example, to sing in a musical or an opera for several weeks, you're going to need a much more expensive visa in some of these countries. And so I think that there's another issue, which is the cost in your own time of the bureaucracy of this. Now, when you want to apply for a visa to go and work in Spain, you have to hand over your passport. And if they've got your passport for 2 or 3 weeks, you can't go anywhere else in that time, and nor can you book a visa in any other country during that time. Your passport is sealed up, as it were, in the system, and that's going to happen to musicians the whole time who are applying in different countries. There used to be a system that the British government had to allow people who worked a lot internationally to have a second passport. I don't know why that scheme was abandoned, perhaps something to do with hostile environment, who knows, but that would be a very good thing to help musicians and others who have to tour abroad all the time or work abroad to be able to process this vast amount of bureaucracy that's coming their way. So that second passport, so I'd like to just note that. A lot of people say, well, they want us to compare ourselves with getting visas for the US. They say, well, if you can get a visa for the US, you need carnets for the US, what are you making a fuss about going to the EU? The difference with the US is this. It is very expensive and it's time consuming, and you need a lot of help from your sponsor organizations in the US. But once you've got your work visa, you can work across all 50 states of America. Every time you cross a state boundary, you don't have to open your van and show all your gear and show your customs gear. What's more, you can do a series of gigs in America which probably do make it viable and actually cover the costs of those expenses. But what you don't do is you don't go to New York for one night and come back and do a gig in London the next night and do another gig the next night in Berlin. That's what we have been doing for 30 or so years in the EU. What you do in America is you go for a block of time and you do your work there. And by the way, a new band starting out or a young classical musician who's just starting out in their career is very, very difficult, bordering on impossible to get a visa for the United States. It's much easier if you're established or you've got big tours to do or you're a name, and you have to show an incredible array of the things that have happened in your career and your awards and your recognition in order to get those work visas for the US. So it really isn't a good comparison with what we have got used to in the EU. And I'm going to just quickly say that half of these problems, which Ian and many others have said, are to do with carnets and customs and not actually to do with visas. And the reason why we have all these problems with carnets and customs is because we withdrew, in my view, in an insane act from the customs union of the European Economic Area. And by the way, withdrawing from this customs union was not on the ballot paper in June 2016. And it's never been put to the British people whether they want to withdraw from the customs union. Right now, a Turkish musician, a Turkish band, a Turkish orchestra can tour across the EU much more easily and much less expensively than anyone from Britain. And Turkey is not, whatever Vote Leave tried to tell you, a member of the EU. And my final point would be this, that musicians, I'm pretty sure, care much more about this issue, much more than they do than the proposed festival of Brexit. And my advice to ministers would be, read the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. We perhaps should have had you on some of the Remain broadcasts, and perhaps the outcome might have been different, but that's a whole different topic. And finally, in this section, I'm going to bring in, on my note here, he's described as a singer, but I think his name just speaks volumes and nobody thinks twice, they know who he is. Fish.
Hi, Julie, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Derek Dick, also better known as Fish. I've been a professional musician for over 40 years. Signed to EMI, was in a band called Marillion, went solo in '88. And since then, I've been really pursuing an independent model. We've kind of whittled things down. We work a kind of guerrilla operation in Europe when we go out. It's a nightliner and it's a trailer. As we said, I mean, trying to prepare for what has been thrown at us has been virtually impossible, and the impact is horrendous. We're now facing, for example, I mean, most of my work is in Europe. I'd say probably this year we had 15 UK and approximately 45, 50 European shows. There are countries we won't be able to play now. I'm still trying to get information. I mean, as everybody's pointed out, trying to get the information, to get the numbers is virtually impossible. It needs to be, it needs to be brought into one spot to find this thing. But I mean, for example, you know, in Denmark, we'll play one show, right? In Copenhagen, Belgium, one show, Paris, one show, Spain, 2 shows. But that doesn't work anymore, because we're going to have the visa costs, all the costs of bureaucracy getting loaded onto those single shows. Playing 14 shows in Germany, not a problem. 5, 7 shows to, you know, 1,000, 2,000 people in Holland, not a problem. You can swallow that. But the issue is that getting these visas, as has been pointed out already, the bureaucracy and the time involved, you have to pay people to do this, right? And finding a way to get the visas, to get through into those situations is very, very difficult. On a practical basis, I mean, even on visas now, I mean, we travel in a nightliner with a trailer, right? We'll have a carney for the equipment. Every border, we are going to have to stop in the middle of the night to get that carney stamped. If we do not get that carney stamped, there's a fine. I was fined £1,000 at a Swiss border once, or after, when we had to send the guy in to get the passports, the carney stamp later on. £1,000 for missing that. That, you're driving up to border points now that are basically small houses. They're not elaborate systems. You don't even know if there's somebody on that point at night. You could be doing a loadout at 2 o'clock in the morning, hitting a border at 4 o'clock in the morning, then the carney's got to be stamped, and you have to get your passport stamped. The customs guys could say, unload the truck, check the carney against all the equipment that's in it. You're asking the crew to come out at 4 o'clock in the morning and unload, do another load in, load out in a truck, and get the passport stamped, and with the prospect of a fine. Driver's hours, trying to hit gigs at specific times and on schedules has become a lot more difficult now. For us, you know, with visas, you're going to have to pay for those visas ahead of time. For somebody like myself playing the numbers we do, that is achievable. For a young band that's going out playing a club to 150 people, that is going to be a hell of a hit. And in the same way as not just the equipment, but even with merchandise, which is the backbone of most touring bands nowadays, especially young bands. You know, the VAT considerations that you've got to take on board now. Everything is heavy duty. And what's not been said is that the EU is the 3rd biggest music market in the world, and it's on our doorstep, right? It's on our doorstep. You know, when we go out, when we sign deals, or when we create records, you've also got to remember that streaming, Spotify, etc., it's changed. When I started in 1982, basically you did a tour to support an album, right? Now you do an album to support the tour, because you cannot make you can't make the income from physical product. You're definitely not making it from streaming. So the live element is where you're catching most of your income. And you don't tour 365 days a year. You know, you're going out maybe once in Europe every 18 months. And as I said, the load that's getting put on these individual gigs, and for the ability of young bands, and I think to take away those dreams from musicians that are in the UK, creating albums that are just trying to break into a market that's an hour away in a ferry, right? You know, to have all this weight and pressure put on them, you know, to make it virtually impossible. You know, it has to be addressed, because these bands that are going out and playing those small clubs in Holland, in Belgium, in France, in Germany, they are the future of the British music industry. And that is where the government will be making, you know, a lot of revenue in the future if those bands become successful. You know, we have to look at we have to look at being able to get this free travel. We have to get the free travel and make it as easy as we can to move, to tour, to take our music abroad. You know, I'm very worried about, you know, where my future touring is going to be at, especially when it's linked with, as I said, my independent model, which is, as I said, I'm self-managed. It's my own record company, and the touring and the merchandise together, right? That is my life, right? Yeah. And it's been stolen.
And the touring thing, I think, is, we've been hearing select committee about the problems with streaming and the finances. Touring is just so key, isn't it, to young artists coming through, but to basically for people to pay their bills. And we're ahead of the game in this industry, and it seems without sorting this out, we are going to go backwards. But thank you very, very much for your contribution today. I'm going to move on now to the second panel. So we've looked at the personal impacts on the various parts of this. We're now going to look from some of the more representative bodies and the impact that they're seeing amongst their people. So we're going to start off with Jessie Murphy, who is the founder of Let Music Live. Jessie.
Hi everybody, thank you so much. I'd firstly just like to massively echo everything that Tim Brennan said. I guess if I'm representing anyone, it's the average freelance violinist, musician, everything. I'm a violinist. I was part of the, well, it was sort of my idea to put together the demonstration outside Parliament and in Birmingham last October. Since then, it's been an amazing thing. So many freelance people have come together, and just as an example, actually, this morning, a friend of mine, Fiona Bryce, who's an amazing composer, violinist, and a signed artist in her own right, texted me this morning to say the 8th is the anniversary of the last gig she did. And it was in Belgium. She wouldn't be able to have done that this year, even despite COVID. And I think number one is this is an industry where no one has worked for a year already. No one. I mean, apart from perhaps the odd recording session, and we are so desperate to get back, and there is absolutely no way on earth we can do that unless we are able to join with other musicians in other countries and let work flow like it normally does. It's like an intricate river system, the music industry. We're like a tributary that goes into it, and if we cut it off, we're a stagnant pond. That is it. There isn't enough work in the UK for us. We can't just go, right, fine, there's a small version of the LSO down the road in Brighton where I live, I'll just join that and it's fine. It's not like that at all. We feed each other, we need each other, we need to tour to our audiences, they need to come back. It's just not the way it works. I do believe, and I apologise if this is wrong, that the Formula One has been given some kind of arrangement where they can still proceed, and obviously it's a very dissimilar industry, but the creative industry as a whole, as we all know, is worth £111 billion, which is the second biggest industry as a whole. And we're talking about all the creative industries here, which I think is very important. I really echo that. It's not just musicians we're talking about. It's the second biggest industry in the UK. All those people are looking at being unemployed. That's useful for no one, you know, and we seem to have a situation where the government keeps saying, and I'd say this to the MPs who are present really, they keep coming back and going, yes, well, it's an absolutely dreadful state of affairs. I'm terribly sorry, but, you know, we offered them something and they said no. And that is just not an answer. You know, we are not going to be able to rebuild in the UK without being able to go into Europe. They have to go back to the table. We are the ones, after all, who've left the EU. They can't go, our door is open. We need to be banging on their door going, please, you know. Anyway, I don't want to take up loads of everyone's time. Everyone's already been so eloquent, but just to say, this is an industry made of carpenters, wig designers, electricians, haulage drivers. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs at stake, and the people whose jobs at stake are entrepreneurial, they're brilliant, they're desperate to get back to work, and they can be part of what regenerates this entire industry and the country as a whole. You're even just thinking how desperate most people are to just go and see a live gig right now. I certainly am, and I think most people are. I'm more desperate to see one than I am to play one, and that's saying something. You know? So
thank you very much, Jessie.
That's enough. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And again, it's the diversity of people this is affecting. It isn't just the people on the stage. It's so huge. Thank you so much. I'm going to move next to Sasha Lord, who is the director of the Warehouse Project. He advises Greater Manchester on the nighttime economy. Sasha.
No, good morning, everybody. And yeah, you know, as the nighttime economy advisor for Greater Manchester, there's a lot of talk and debate at the moment in the press about when our pubs and our restaurants are going to be reopening. But I think in comparison, there's been very little about live music. And, you know, I'd like to thank Tim for putting this on the agenda, for putting it on the radar. And it's clear how passionate everybody is. But I'm going to come at this today with my Park Life Festival cap on. Because my major concern actually is our new emerging talent. I think it's going to be throttled. You know, as the co-founder of Park Life Festival, our capacity there is 80,000, and I have no illusions at all that people buy the tickets for the headliners. However, I'm extremely proud that we have stages there that support new emerging talent and give them a platform. You know, none of our headliners, the likes of the Gallaghers, the Stormses, the Lewis Capaldis, they didn't become pop stars overnight, and they needed those small grassroots venues, the likes of Night and Day in Manchester with a capacity of 120 to make it. But more importantly, they needed the ability to show their creativity across Europe. And, you know, music is our greatest sport, I'd argue. And we have to protect that emerging talent at all costs, because if we don't, it's going to run dry. And, you know, for one, I'm not particularly interested in finger pointing or who's at blame or anything. I'm just interested in expediting the process, get rid of this ridiculous red tape, you know, the endless paperwork, and most importantly, I think, you know, this is unviable at the moment financially, and everybody's alluded to that with the current restrictions of touring. But let's not at the same time forget, as well as the artists, it's the whole entourage, it's the crew, you know, the sound engineers, the lampies. Tracy mentioned them before. You know, many of those people are past the 3 million who've rebranded themselves the Excluded. They've had no work whatsoever since back in March. You know, there's the whole supply chain, the whole ecology. And I think, you know, I just want to reference an interview that really impacted on me a few weeks ago. It was on Sky News, and the band Alt J, they were interviewed, and it was brilliant. And it really, you know, it drove it home for me. They spoke of a seminal gig in Paris at the very start of their career. And they were paid £400. That £400 covered their petrol. They all got in their car, covered the petrol, the fees for the ferry, a couple of nights accommodation, and a few meals. That was it. And they said that if that gig in Paris hadn't have happened, then possibly Alt J would never have happened. So that's how important it is. And, you know, to finish off, I would strongly urge and plead with this government to establish free movement for all artists and their crew, because if this is not dealt with quickly, the UK will no longer be the global force that it currently is. Emerging talents will be prohibited, and it puts our grassroots venues at even further risk. And sadly, our music industry, I believe, could stagnate. And, you know, and this is an industry that's been hit harder than most during this pandemic. And what it needs right now is help, not further hurdles and hindrances.
Thanks so much, Sasha. Absolutely. I'm going to bring in Tom Keel next from UK Music. Tom.
Hi, Julie, and apologies for a while. Good to see you. Apologies from Jamie Njoku Goodwin, our CEO, who's unfortunately not able to make the call as well. Thank you for Tim Brennan for initiating the petition. It's fantastic to see the progress that's been made on this. UK Music as an organisation brings together record companies, organisations, music publishers, live sector, creator organisations, and the collecting societies. There are many issues where there are fierce debates around the table at UK Music, but on the issue of Brexit and the proposed solutions, I think I'm relatively confident in saying that we're very much at one on this and the issues which affect the sector. In terms of, I think it's very much the focus within our Europe is such a big market, but the focus is obviously on countries like Germany, France, Spain, Italy, potential barriers in some of those countries. Actually, more broadly, I think it's important to recognise that a country like Belgium, a country like Netherlands, 1 in 5 albums sold from UK artists in those countries too. It's not just about the big, huge Western European countries we're concerned about. It's about some of the smaller nations too, and it's vital that we have reciprocal access to touring in those nation states. I would say there's very much three areas where I would say there are particular solutions where we are calling for on behalf of UK Music. Firstly, there should be a bilateral deal with the EU. It's quite apparent from the tit for tat blame game that's going on that there's actually a commonality in there. The commonality is that there's agreement that there does need to be a solution from both the EU side and the UK side. So if we can have a situation where a bilateral deal agreed excluding musicians and their crew from requiring visas. Such deals exist for countries like St. Lucia, UAE, Tonga. Why can't they be in the case for the EU and the UK as well? Secondly, we propose a reciprocal EU-wide work permit regime. Work permits and work visas sometimes get conflated, but work permits also are incredibly important and need to be tackled with. Again, there is a situation where social security states can opt into a regime where there is a reciprocal basis. So it doesn't really require much change in the UK government's position on that. And then thirdly, financial support. When you look at the way the government has stepped in and supported other sectors, fishing, for example, has got 23 million fund to manage their transition to Brexit and the implications there. They should do the same for the music industry. This is going to hit the smallest, the least well-resourced parts of the industry most acutely, but they need to know about export support. They need to know the measures that they need to take in place in order to continue touring. So ideas of such as creating something like an export office, which could be used or part funded from some kind of fund, will go a long way to helping us in this kind of period. COVID is a huge problem, obviously, for the sector. However, given this period now where we aren't touring, but we can get this right, this is a very pivotal moment and we mustn't lose it.
Thanks ever so much, Tom. And starting to look at some possible solutions there as well, which is key to all of this. I'm going to bring in next from the General Secretary of the Musicians Union, Horace Trubridge. Horace.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm going to try and fill in the gaps because obviously a lot of what's been said is stuff I would have said myself, and obviously I support what Tom has said in terms of solutions. I think there's no point in entering into a blame game here. We just need to get the two parties around the table again so we can sort this out. So the MU has 32,000 members, but we're also working with the ISM on this issue. That's a first. We're collaborating with the ISM. And Deborah and I are having regular meetings because this is so important to musicians generally. Union's been working on this with this problem for the last 3 or 4 years now. We started a petition which we even took to the Conservative Party conference and was signed by a lot of Conservative MPs, all about frictionless mobility for musicians in Europe. And we were assured all the way that there wasn't going to be any kind of problem. And I think there's other people on this call right now who got the same message from ministers at the time. There won't be any problem. Well, there is a huge problem, as we know. And I do think, just picking up on what Tracy said, that this is an issue that is perpetuating a problem that we've had in the industry for some time, which is it's only those with the deepest pockets that seem to be able to afford to be musicians these days. You know, those that from an early age can get music lessons on an instrument, for instance, because as Kevin Brennan has famously said, you know, talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't. And what we're doing is we're really narrowing the kind of people who will be successful, who can afford to be successful in the music business. And by doing that, we're narrowing the sort of cultural pool of music, and we won't have bands like Happy Mondays or Madness or bands like that emerging out of council estates in the way that we did before, because it's just becoming an industry that you can only access and maintain a career in if you've got money. And the problems that have been explained about how expensive it will be to go and work in Europe just exacerbate that problem. We've seen venues in the UK close over the last 10 or 15 years. There's nowhere near the kind of opportunity for live music that there was 15, 20 years ago in the UK. And so it's been even more important for artists in the UK to be able to travel into Europe easily, cheaply, in order to get gigs and work live. And with COVID, of course, we've seen the decimation of live work. It's really sort of shone a huge spotlight on the fact that earnings from recorded music from streaming simply cannot replace what you earn from live. They can't mean that a musician can sustain a career. That's an issue that I know Julie is concerned with, and we will be tackling later this week, but it's something that has to be addressed. But COVID has really thrown that up, how important live work is. And right now we've got musicians, my members, who are talking to counterparts in EU member states and saying, look, maybe later in the year we could look at some gigs, and they're all worried about it. They're all saying, well, we're not sure if we can look at any gigs because we're not quite sure whether or not we're going to have extra costs in bringing you in. And the musicians themselves are looking at it and saying, well, I'm not even sure whether I can afford to go and work in Europe at all now. I saw a blog by an artist, this multi-synth player. He's a solo artist, and he's actually looked at how much it's going to cost him to go and do one gig in Spain. And apart from the fact he's going to have to travel to the embassy in London to get a visa to go and do that gig in Spain, the total costs are somewhere in the region of £800 just to do one gig. And of course, all the administration, bureaucracy involved in all of that. What hasn't been mentioned so far, and I know this is something that will be dear to Howard's heart, as it is to all musicians, and that is the cross-cultural fertilization that you get with, you know, the ease of European musicians being able to come to the UK, work with UK musicians and vice versa. And it's so important that we get that. And, you know, things like Afrobeats has been successful in the UK because of that free and easy travel of musicians and the sharing of ideas, which enhances our music industry and makes us all enjoy music even more. That's so important. But finally, I want to say, look, we've talked about how difficult it is for a 5-piece band. Imagine how difficult it is for a 70-piece orchestra. And, you know, all the problems that they're going to face in terms of visas, work permits, the haulage issue, which I think Jesse mentioned earlier that we've heard, and I've heard a rumour that Sport have been given an exemption on the haulage, on the cabotage provisions. Now, I don't know if that's right. We need to drill down and find out if that is the case, but that's happened very quickly. So where's our exemption? We need that too. Otherwise, you know, the LSO won't be able to go and tour in Europe. And it's gonna be impossible for musicians to have that frictionless mobility. So,
thanks, Horace.
Yeah, I think that will probably do. Thank you.
Yeah, it's again what's coming through with everybody. We could all talk all day about this because it's so obvious there needs to be a solution very quickly. So finally in this session, I want to bring in Noel McLean, who is the National Secretary of BEC2. Noel.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Hello there. So BEC2 represents workers across the creative industries, mainly in kind of backstage and technical areas, and this plugs right in, which is why I'm delighted to be here and delighted to offer BEC2's full support actually for Tim's petition and the kind of wider campaign. And what's been great is the kind of breadth of the panel and the breadth of the kind of discussion where this is viewed, at least on this panel for this event, to be right across the industry. And that's really good to see, because I think sometimes in kind of parliamentary circles and decision-making circles, I think that point sometimes gets missed. So many of our members makes a significant portion of their income from touring across the EU. Many of them, you know, report that half or 3/4 of their annual earnings come from touring in the EU, and they're simply not going to be able to do that once this comes in with the current rules. So in terms of what it might mean, I think we are actually starting to see that. We have been sent adverts, copies of adverts, where, to be fair, it's corporate gigs, but they are advertising for technicians, they are advertising for touring professionals, and they are actually stating at this moment they're not looking for UK passport holders, or they're saying only non-UK passport holders ought to apply. And it just shows you the kind of level of debate in this country as opposed to the reality of how this affects working people, because they don't seem to care actually what colour it is. We had a big debate about returning our passports back to deepest blue. But over there, it doesn't matter. You know, the colour of the passport doesn't seem to matter. So people are being told, UK passport holders, please don't apply for this opening. The cabotage rules, the carnet rules, that's part of it as well. And we are starting to see that as we are hearing about specialist companies who supply kit, specialist kit and hire kit, seem to be setting up so these are UK companies setting up a permanent base in the EU to avoid some of these rules. Now, that's understandable, and no one's going to criticise them for that. But of course, all that equipment has to be serviced, it has to be maintained. And the way it sits at the moment, that won't be done by UK workers. So right across the piece, UK workers are gonna kind of lose out. I think it's worth talking about this bit about the economy again, because it is so important. You know, 111 billion in terms of value to the UK economy, 5.8 billion just from music alone, 36 billion in UK exports, which makes up 12% of the UK's service exports came from the creative sector. And I think that there might be a temptation to view an economic powerhouse like that, because it is. Before lockdown, the creative industries were a rate of growth which is twice that of the rest of the UK economy. There is temptation to think that there's some resilience there, but of course there isn't. It's a very delicate ecology. The whole industry is based on, you know, collaboration and kind of inter kind of dependencies, and I think that is being lost. And I think if we don't get this sorted out, one of our members said to me during the week leading up to this, he said, look, sometimes when you listen to politicians talk about us, they seem to be at a point where they don't know enough. And if they do know enough, they don't understand enough. And if they know enough and understand enough, they're certainly not doing enough. And there's a real danger that if we don't get this sorted out on the back of COVID and the woeful support for freelancers that was put in place for those, that we're all going to end up poorer. People will lose work, people will lose income, the country will be poorer financially, but also crucially poorer in a cultural sense as well. And we've got to make some movement on this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Noel. I think as from a parliamentarian's point of view, the amount of MPs that have tried to get into the debate today shows just how high up the agenda this has moved. So I think many politicians do care massively about this. Before I go on to panel 3, we've now been joined by Eliza Carthy, who is a folk singer who was due to speak in the first panel. So I'm going to bring Eliza in now to make her contribution before moving on to panel 3. Eliza. You're on mute, Eliza.
How's that? Hello, how do you do, Julie? My apologies for my lateness. I was recording a piece for Look North about this very thing and didn't quite realise I was on so early, so that's very much my fault. For somebody like me who up until recently was touring with a 17-piece band, and I'm not what you would call a top-tier musician, but up until recently I was just about able to afford to take a 17-piece band over to Europe. That's completely not possible for me now with arrangements the way that they are. I mean, aside from anything else, I pay my musicians and crew for their time, and I have spoken to several people at my kind of level who remember Carnes and what it was like to have to cross multiple borders. And one particular band was talking about a 12-hour inspection where they were literally taking down notes of their plectrums and things like that. They spent 12 hours at one border. Now, if someone like me has to say I'm playing in 5 different festivals, I've been in Germany and France, Belgium, that kind of thing. Then if I have to spend an extra 12 hours at every single border, I'm paying for a sleeper bus, I'm paying for a trailer, I'm paying for an extra van, I'm paying, and I'm also paying for the 11 band members and 6 crew that I'm traveling with as well. And it just renders it completely impossible. There's absolutely no way, if things stay the way that they are, that I can afford to tour in Europe at all. It's not going to happen. Now, part of what I do, because I'm an English traditional musician, is cross-cultural collaboration. If we don't also have arrangements for EU musicians to be able to come here, not only am I not going to be able to collaborate with them in Europe, I'm not going to be able to collaborate with them here either. Sorry to talk about it, but I got my MBE for services to music because I specifically act as an ambassador for English traditional culture. And being able to take that to other musicians from other cultures is a big part of what I do. I mean, it really is. It absolutely knocks out my ability to do that as well, which I believe, not just for myself, but I believe that really hurts us culturally on the wider international stage.
Thank you very much, Eliza. And that is the bottom line with this. It's basically going to stop people coming through, and some of the less huge artists, shall we say, which is the majority of musicians, being able to do their job. And for me, as a consumer of it all, being able to listen, that's what this is all about. It's like we're exporting an industry, and it's just appalling. Anyway, I'm very annoyed about the whole thing. But thank you very much, Eliza.
Thank you.
We're going to move on now to the session about what can we do to support free movement. There's a question. I could make a flippant remark and perhaps say not having left the EU, but never mind. I'm going to bring in a colleague of mine in Parliament, Kerry McCarthy. Kerry.
Okay, thanks, Julie, and thanks to the previous speakers. I mean, particularly, I think Eliza just absolutely summed up what a complete and utter mess this is going to be. I'm fortunate enough that I am going to be able to speak in the debate this afternoon. But in terms of this particular session now, I wanted to focus just on one particular aspect, which a lot of people have mentioned in passing, which is the cabotage rules and how they affect hauliers. And that's partly because in my role as a shadow transport minister, it's very much in my brief. But also I think it, you know, while it's not the most exciting and obviously relatable part of it, it is really important. As Tim Brennan said in his opening remarks, and I want to thank him for constantly being in touch with me and DMing me and giving me extra information and putting me in touch with people. You know, we are all in this together. It's not just about the musicians, it's everyone involved in putting on tours. And that does include those who transport the gear, the sets, the lighting, anything involved in a gig from A to B. And actually, whereas with most of the haulage sector, you'll find that about 85% of the drivers that are involved in UK EU trade aren't actually from UK. With music tours and other events and festivals, you know, the concert trucks business, it's the other way around. About 85% are UK based, and we're often used as a stopping point for if someone like, you know, when some of the big American artists were looking to tour the EU, they'd often fly everything into Heathrow, and all the logistics would be arranged by UK companies taking them out into Europe. So it's really important. And we've seen the impact that Brexit has had, you know, the actual end of the transition period has had on the haulage sectors. We've heard news over the weekend that UK exports are down 68%. We've seen the lorry parks and what's happening at Dover and Felixstowe. And all those problems are very real, and I would say were entirely predictable. But there's one aspect of the Brexit deal that's made it even worse, and that's the new road haulage rules, which basically say that whereas in the past you used to be able to do unlimited journeys from the UK to Europe and up to 3 stops per European country, and even that wasn't really tightly enforced, now you can do 3 stops in total. So that freedom of movement has gone. And for most UK hauliers, it's fine because most of them will pick up a consignment here, they'll drop it off somewhere and then come back with another load, although they're finding that increasingly difficult because of all the other barriers to trade. But generally it's a point-to-point business. But obviously for hauliers that are going on tour or they're servicing the festivals, they're doing events all around the EU, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And when I raised this with the Transport Minister just after the deal was agreed, she basically said, yeah, she shrugged and said, yes, but it will be okay for most people. Well, we're obviously not here this morning to be worried about the most people. We're here to try to make sure that European music tours and other events can stay on the road. So there's a number of things that we're asking for as part of a cultural exemption for hauliers. So that's exempting events hauliers and their trucks from the return home rule for drivers, exempting them from the 3-stop rule, so they can only do 3 stops across the whole of the EU, persuading the EU to recognise the UK driver CPC qualification, because at the moment they're saying they're not, and then recognising drivers as part of the road crew when it comes to the visa issue. All those things we're pushing for. As somebody said, you know, it seems like there's been an exemption now for sport, so let's try and get that for the music sector as well.
Thanks, Kerry, very much. And I think the key thing there is, you know, this was all so predictable. It didn't need to be like this. That's what's so annoying about it. But we've just got to try and get the government to move and put it right, basically. I'm going to bring in next Lord Tony Berkeley. Tony.
I'm not sure he's there, Julie.
Has he not come in? Is Lord German there? Lord?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Brilliant.
Listen, can I say first of all, I recognise the anguish and the hurt that everyone's feeling. As you rightly say, Julie, it's utterly predictable. And whether it's cabotage, visas, work permits, social security, instruments, or just plain work, doing the work that musicians do, it's all a nightmare. And as Fish says, my life has been stolen. And I think that sums it up for everybody so far, what we've been hearing. So it's looking for solutions is the big area that we're, I think, we must concentrate on now. I think it was Horace who said we've got to get the two parties around the table. Well, I'm sorry, but there are three parties to this. I think as Tom Keel said, that is the government, the industry in the UK, but also the EU. And that's where the brick wall has been put up. I put in the chat the conversation that I had with the minister in Parliament just about 10 days ago. And as you can see, I smoked out the issue that really matters. Will you go back to the EU and have a discussion? And the answer to that was no, they're not going to go back to the EU. So it strikes me that if the first thing that has to happen is that we have got to get the government, in whatever guise they want to talk about, to go back to the EU to try and form some form of arrangement, whatever that arrangement might be. Because reciprocity, and Howard Goodall was absolutely right, it's all about what we know about the single market and the customs union, which is causing all this trouble. We've got to get back to something where there's a joint agreement between the EU and the British government. And at the moment, the British government is not prepared to make that first move. And that really is the first thing I think we should try and achieve. Outside of that, if what the government is proposing, as far as I can tell, is something that looks like what Tom Keel called a trade office. So basically, help to be able to go through all the paperwork and the minefields that you have to go through. That's, in my view, is not going to solve the problem, because clearly, if you're going to try and work across the European Union with free movement working in both directions, in whatever way you do it, if just having an office which deals with paperwork, it may make things slightly faster, but it will not remove the barriers. Because I suspect that this brick wall which the government has built between itself and the European Union on movement of people is the one which needs to be moved fastest of all in order to make it happen. So in my view, the first thing that has to happen is we must put pressure on the government to actually go back to the European Union. They say they've got an open door, but they're not going to allow they're not going to invite the European Union to walk through it. They're not going to go back to them. They're just going to sit here and wait for somebody else to move. And I believe that should be the challenge for everybody on this call, whether you're a politician, whether you're a musician, or whether you are in the music industry, to try and get people to start talking. So we can get the two parties around the table, but we've got to get the three.
Thank you very, very much, Michael. That was somebody in the chat has said exactly. You summed that up very well, thank you. There is an opportunity now for people to contribute and ask questions. If you can just indicate in the chat, we've got a small amount of time. Hilary Ben wants to come in. Hilary.
I'm on mute. There we go. Julie, thank you very much indeed. Can I echo the thanks to Tim for the petition? I mean, I've listened for the last, it's almost 45 minutes to passion, eloquence and anger about the position we find ourselves in. And it's really hard to resist just saying, well, welcome to Brexit. However, we have a practical problem and we've got to do something about it. Now, I know that going back over the past, in one sense, doesn't help, but we do need to understand, because we haven't yet got to the bottom of it, of who offered what to whom during the negotiations. Because if we don't get to the bottom of that, we won't fully understand the position both of the UK government, because they've claimed they made an offer, it was rejected, but Michel Barnier has also said, no, we made an offer to the UK which was rejected. And a lot of press reporting has said, because it would have, in effect, driven a coach and horses through the points-based immigration system that the government has put in place. And it's really important that we understand this. So I think the practical steps are, one, to keep up this campaign, because anyone listening to what's been said today would realize what a self-inflicted wound it is. And the fact that so many of those who are impacted are also the excluded who have had no meaningful support because they haven't been able to work and they haven't been part of the self-employed income support scheme or furlong over the last year, I think gives it added force. Secondly, to get the government, as Michael was just saying, to say, all right, we will go back to the EU, because part of the trade and cooperation agreement envisages further agreements being negotiated and agreed as part of the framework. And the third part is to, I would contact Michel Barnier, because I'm still waiting for a letter from the Prime Minister, because I raised this question with him when he appeared before the Liaison Committee about a month ago. And what he said in answer to me didn't quite square with what has been reported happened in the negotiations. So to get from Michel Barnier a clear understanding of what the EU might be prepared to agree to, obviously it would have to be reciprocal, really important to understand that, as we all do, because that then is the basis on which we can say to the government, look, the EU might be prepared to consider something, but you need to go and talk to them. And on this issue, on the impact on fisheries, on, I mean, a growing number of sectors of the economy who are realizing what the practical consequences of cost, bureaucracy and red tape are, particularly in the midst of a terrible economic recession anyway, because of COVID. We just have to keep the pressure up. And you'll find a very large number of MPs, because every constituency will have people who are affected by this. Write to your own MP. I'm sure you've all done it, but for all of the artists and performers, get to your own MP and say, will you put pressure on the government to go and sort this out, because we can't cope with the consequences. And it's such a self-inflicted wound for the country.
Thank you, Hilary. And as ever on these kind of things, I agree with every word you're saying. There is also a letter that Devo Connect have organised, which you should have all been emailed, and I think it's been put in the chat, or if it hasn't, it will be, where we're asking people to sign, organisations, individuals, a letter to the Prime Minister raising the issues that we've all been talking about this morning. I don't know if anyone else wants to contribute this morning. There is so much information that's been given. So I think what I'm going to do, because there's been lots of comment in the chat, but nobody particularly wanting to ask a question, is bring Tim back in, who is the originator of all of this. And can I just say at this point, thank you so much again, Tim, for organising it. It's just it brought everybody around this burning issue. And, you know, on the select committee the other day, we were listening to people talking about the haulage industry, hugely successful, not just supporting British artists, but European artists as well. And they really have the monopoly on this business across Europe. And it feels to me, and what I was hearing the other day, that we're exporting a business. We're not going to be able to operate like that, and European hauliers will pick up the slack in Europe. And that in itself, you know, economically is just so absolutely ridiculous. But I'm going to bring Tim in now to respond and perhaps try and bring out the salient things that we've heard today, and that to perhaps tell us the real, you know, 3 or 4 things that you want MPs to all mention this afternoon to really hammer home the point to government. Tim.
Quite clearly, I'm not a politician, and I'm not an economist either. But what Noel said about us losing our work is very real. As a freelancer, you know, we are getting companies emailing us saying to us, you know, if you haven't got an EU passport, we can't employ you. You know, and that's thousands of my colleagues and my friends all facing life on the scrap heap. You know, something needs to be done about that, but there you go. I would like to make one final point, really, and that's about the wider economics of touring. When a large tour comes to town, say a stadium-sized tour, and you're looking at upwards of 50,000 fans going to that to see that show. That's 50,000 people that will eat, drink, and they're going to stay at a hotel, or possibly stay at a hotel, local establishments in that area, in that local economy. You know, and it's not just
the big shows like that, it's hundreds and hundreds of little gigs all over the EU, and it's every night. And without our freedom of movement to sort of go through there and play those gigs, the gigs aren't going to happen. You know, and those little economies that are in Europe, not just here, but in Europe, they're going to lose out as well as us. You know, it's not just about us. It's about all those little ecosystems around the venues that we play in. You know, and that's my final point. And maybe it's a good point, maybe, to start negotiations with the EU on.
Thank you so much. And it's so sad today with COVID as it is that all of you can't be in Parliament today, because that, when we have a crucial debate like this, one of the things that really adds weight, and it's just unfortunate the way that we're operating at the minute with COVID, is when people that this really affects come along to Parliament and make their presence felt. But can I just say that it's been a real privilege chairing this session today. I think it's very unusual that you get so many parliamentarians really being worried about this. It's so clear that there is a logical solution to this. It can be sorted out. It just needs the government to put their mind to it and get it sorted out. And can I also say that it's an opportunity to thank all of you for providing the endless pleasure that we all have. And, you know, when we get back to a normal world and reality, I think you will be swamped for people wanting to come and take part in your festivals, listening to your music. I think we all crave that interaction and that part of our life that we've just so sadly missed for the last year. So I think we'll be all flocking to try and see everybody. But thank you very much. I think it's been a really wide-ranging discussion, and I'm sure the debate this afternoon will be incredibly successful in getting the point across to government. So thank you very much.
Before we finish, can we just bring in Craig Stanley?
Yes, wherever Craig Stanley is, happy to.
Hi there, my name's Craig. I'm chair of a thing called the Touring Group, which is a working group under Live, which is about 10 trade associations, some of which are actually represented on this call. And we've put together 5 key asks of government, which we published on the Live site. And we're also pragmatists, so while we completely agree with all of the statements offered so far, I think the one thing that is missing for me is that the pressure to actually look for immediate solutions now, as well as longer term ones, and accepting that it will take a little time for the government to actually renegotiate with the EU. And they can be summed up as to immediately enter into bilateral discussions with those member states which we have collectively identified as preventing visas and work permits being issued without onerous costs of bureaucracy, to actually immediately call on the government to remove their own cabotage restrictions. So those UK haulage operators who have gone and located in the EU can now return back. So what were British trucks have now become European trucks, so they can work in Europe. When the UK government to immediately release that they can now return back to the UK, that's in the UK government's gift, and to provide money for more of those haulage companies to relocate in Europe, including the orchestra trucks. To immediately make clear what the ATA conditions are. None of the government websites are very clear. In fact, they're actually contradictory at times about when and how and to what extent you need an ATA carnet, particularly around portable musical instruments. And that is something which is in their gift they could do tomorrow. We also asked them for immediate guidance on VAT and Social Security. Now, there was an opt-out system, which we understand on February 1st of February, all 27 member states agreed to opt out. The UK government is yet to actually respond to that and to say exactly what is on Social Security and VAT. Again, it's in their gift. They don't have to go and negotiate anything. And the last thing is to immediately take steps to introduce a form of music export office that can actually be a central resource to actually publish very quickly what the situation is for us to go out into Europe and to provide financial support for the extra bureaucracy and costs incurred by all sectors of the music community to actually work in Europe. Again, it's entirely in their gift to do that. and they could do that immediately. And we've written to the government and made that very clear. Those are our 5 asks.
Thank you very much, Craig. That's a very clear list of things that government need to be doing to sort this mess out. So once again, I'd say thank you very much to everyone. If you can sign the letter that Devo Connective circulated, and I wish everybody good luck who's on the call, who's managed to get into the debate this afternoon, and the rest of us parliamentarians will be there behind you, rooting for you. So let's wish them well and hope for a swift solution to this problem. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you, everyone.